Welcome CSC 235 Advanced Web class. We're going to be working on ex3 function date, we're going to call it. And it's actually going to continue where we left off with ex2 where we did the get date, except we're going to add some buttons and we're going to basically use a function to display our text that's going to display on the page. So if we hit, this is an example of finished product. If we hit show date, you can see our display is going to show up, and when we hide it, it's going to hide it. Now, a couple things just to point out here that since the last time we worked on it, it is updating. It's showing 1, which is the second month, 01, so it's February. It's the third day of the week. It's a Wednesday, so I'm working on Wednesday right now, and it's February 8th. So these numbers are staying up to date, and it's showing the correct day that I'm actually working on this. And what I'm going to ask you to do is open up your previous one, if you can, if you still have your password to your js.do. We're going to work in js.do, and again, the only thing I'm not crazy about js.do is it doesn't color code our JavaScript. But even in W3 schools, it only color codes the strings that we have here. So that's the only thing, and the keywords. So that's just a couple keywords. So we should be okay for at least this, and then we'll probably move on to brackets. To do this, what I'm going to ask you to do is go into where your code is and find the one that has get date part 3, as long as it was working, and just click on it. And you're going to kind of save over it. So what you're going to do is you're going to change the name before you do anything. So I'm going to call it ex3. And I'm going to call it function date, and you could put it all together. You could put a dash in, or you could just call it function date, and there should only be part 1, so you shouldn't have to put any part. So it'll be ex3 function date, and it should be in your directory that you're working on for js.do. So it's going to be called ex3-function date, and then I'm going to do save as new JS. And I could just see there that it is saved as the new version. So change the name and then save as new JS. And then as you're working, then you could do save update. So what we're going to do on this one, now this is the last one that we did. It's just displaying our code on the page. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add a couple things here. Now I'm going to scroll down. Remember, this code is displaying on the page because of this statement here, the one that says document get element by ID display date string. And that's this H2, display date string was what I called it. And it's saying in that area, or using that ID, put inner HTML full date string. And full date string is this one right above it. So basically it added all our variables together, and what it displayed on the page was that. Now it's just displaying automatically. What we're going to do is we're going to have that display with a function. We're basically going to have that function be triggered by a button event. So what we're going to do first is I'm just going to put what we have, and I'll just stretch this out a little because there's not a lot to see over here. This is our statement. I'm going to put this inside of a function, and a function, so you learn about functions. If you go to W3 schools and you go to your JavaScript, you could scroll all the way down. There is a thing called JS functions, but actually if you go all the way down to where there's a section called JS functions, and it has function definitions. That's where I am right now. It basically just gives you a little bit of information. It says functions are defined with the function keyword, and it says you can use a function declaration or function expression. In this part with JS functions, it describes the function. I wish it would just put it all together, but it says a JavaScript function is a block of code designed to perform a particular task, and that's what's going to happen. And then we're going to basically invoke it with some method. Now I'm going to go back down to this part here. And just to show you how it's set up, it's pretty simple. It's basically a keyword. Just like we had var, a keyword, we're going to have a keyword called function. And for anybody who had ActionScript, it did the same thing. So function is the keyword, then you are going to give it a name. So when you're basically defining the function, you have to give it a name. You have to say function, function name, just like when you did var and you gave it a variable name. Now here there's a parentheses. Now it says parameters. You do not have to put parameters in there, and we're not going to put them in right now. So this can be empty. But you'll still need the parentheses. They'll just be empty parentheses. And then basically the code that's going to be executed is going to go inside of curly brackets. So we're going to set that up. So it's not that difficult. It's just basically function keyword, function name, parentheses, and then curly brackets. And then we're going to write some statements in the curly brackets. So if I go back to js.do, I'm just going to, I already have this done. So I'm just going to type the word function, and that's my keyword, and then give it a name, and I'm going to call it show date. And I'll give it the parentheses, and then I'll put a opening curly bracket, and I'll hit return, and I'm going to tab this in, and then you have to finish it off with a curly bracket. So that's basically a function definition right now. So we're defining a function. It's called showDate. There's no parameters in here. And then inside the curly brackets is the list of tasks that are going to occur. And right now it's just going to say, it's going to display this on the page. So if I ran the code right now, nothing happens. And that's because what's happening, instead of just being kind of loose in our code, is now kind of inside a function, and the function isn't being initiated in any way. And we're going to initiate that, or basically make it occur with a button event. But we're just defining the function, but we're not running the function. And just let me show you, if we did want to run the function, we don't need a button to do that. We could basically, I could type the word showDate here and just put a semicolon. I can run that function. Even though it's before where it's being defined, I could still run it. So just that word showDate could actually run the function. So if I ran the code right now, it would actually run it. So this statement right here, showDate, is basically initiating the function. Now we're not going to do it that way because we could have just left it the way it was. So what we are going to do with showDate is we're going to have a button actually initiate the function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up in my HTML code. Now this isn't HTML. We're going outside of our JavaScript. And what we're going to do is right below the P, we're going to put a button. And we can just write a button. We'll just do it real simple right now. We'll just use a button tag. We'll use a button element. We won't give it any type or anything. We'll just call it button just for now for what we're doing. Eventually we'll give it different types, but we'll just call it button. And then inside button, we're just going to put a label on it, which is just going to be showDate. We just have a button that says showDate. So if I ran the code, you should now see a button that says showDate. Now it doesn't do anything. If I click on it, it doesn't do anything. It's just a button that says showDate. It has an opening and closing tag. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put an event onto that button from this function that we have here. So we're going to have that button run the function is what we're going to do. And we already know the function is called showDate. So I didn't change. What's going to happen isn't changing. This thing isn't going to change at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to my button, and I'm going to do something called button, and I'm going to say onClick. That's basically an event that can make something happen. I'm going to say onClick equals. Now because JavaScript is kind of outside of HTML, we have to put it in quotes, just like we put IDs in quotes. And I'm going to put the showDate function name. So I'm going to put the function name inside here. I don't have to put the semicolon inside here. I'm just going to say, okay, on click, when you click the button, you're going to run the showDate function. And remember, this showDate is the label. That's the label. This showDate is the function that we have down here. So we define the function. This is the function definition. And then it's actually going to run by clicking on the button. Well, we have to run the code. And then we'll say showDate. And there it is. And if we could click on it, and it shows dates. Now that's not too exciting. What we want to do is we actually want to have it so it shows the date, and then we can actually hide the date. And that'll help us learn a little bit more about functions. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a second function, and we could just copy this. We don't have to write a whole lot of code here. We'll just copy it. And I'll make a second function, and I'll backspace so it's kind of indented the same way. And the second function I'm going to call hideDate. And basically it's not going to show this string right here, and I'll go through a couple ways to do this, but we're going to hide the date. Now that also means we need a second button that's going to hide the date as well. So I'm going to highlight this button here, and I'm just going to copy it, and I'm going to put it after the H2 so that we can, after it displays, it'll be kind of underneath to hide it. So I'm going to put it here, and again, it's not going to run the showDate, it's going to run the hideDate. So let me change that too. So we now have two buttons that are running two functions, two different functions. So we have to run it. It can't do the same thing. It can't hide it and show it at the same time. So this is hideDate. Now, first of all, how are we going to hide date here? It's showing the full date string, you know, that's what it's showing right now. So that's not really going to hide it. If we run this code, it's not really going to do anything. There's showDate. showDate's not doing anything. And one thing I forgot, make sure you change the label. You don't want the same label here. So we're going to change that label so it says hideDate. And then we'll run the code. So at least the button looks better now. showDate and then hideDate. Now hideDate isn't hiding it. Now how could you hide it? Well, one way you could hide it is instead of showing the variable full string, you could basically just put nothing here. You could put a string filled with nothing. You could just put 2 quotes there. That would be nothing. That would basically an empty string. So I could do that. Let me run code. And if I do show date and then I do hide date, that actually works. Show date, hide date. That actually works. That's one way to do it. And we're going to look at another way to do it as well. But that works pretty well. Except we may not want to have that button showing there. So we're going to do a couple things. So let me take a quick break here. I'm just going to save this update of what I just did. And all we did so far was just make 2 functions, a show date and a hide date. And the first one was the same one that showed the full date string. The second one is just putting empty quotes there. And we also have in our HTML 2 buttons. One that on an on-click event is running the show date function. Another one on an on-click event is running the hide date function. So that's what we have so far. Let me take a break here, and then for the next video, I'll just show you a couple variations of this.